Recording. So welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Lovegrove. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Vice President of the Harm Reduction Nurses Association. I just want to first acknowledge that the Harm Reduction Nurses Association does work with individuals and organizations across all of Turtle Island and honor the life force of Indigenous peoples who have had their lands stolen and who continue to resist ongoing genocide. Addressing the root causes of the toxic drug supply is deeply connected to decolonization. I'm joining you today as an uninvited white settler on the traditional unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation, colonially referred to as Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, and our guest is joining us also from Snuneymuxw territory on Gabriola Island. I also want to acknowledge that the work we do at the Harm Reduction Nurses Association is made possible by people with lived and living experience of drug use, sharing their knowledge and experience. Without their generosity, vital life-saving harm reduction initiatives would not exist. So just a quick brief overview of what HRNA is. So the Harm Reduction Nurses Association is a Canadian national organization with a mission to advance harm reduction nursing through practice, education, research, and advocacy. We strive to achieve our mission through the following actions: serving as a national voice for harm reduction and related nursing issues, promoting education and continuous learning opportunities for nurses, which is what we're doing here today, providing opportunities to share nursing knowledge, expertise, and practices, encouraging evidence-based harm reduction nursing practices, creating a dynamic network to support and mentor nurses across the country, advocating for the creation and implementation of harm reduction policies, working collaboratively with partners to address structural conditions that create harms, and advocating for the rights and dignity of people who use drugs and their families. So today, we are very grateful to be able to offer this special edition webinar in recognition of National Nursing Week. Happy Nurses Week to everyone who's here. Just to acknowledge the difficult and complex roles that harm reduction nurses and carers do every day, and to hopefully support you all in developing the resilience, the skills and practices to keep you going in a healthy way while doing this important work. Personally, I arrive here today still in the midst of a messy healing journey lasting nearly 7 years after a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, which arose as a result of my experiences working in an emergency department. As someone who has experienced firsthand the moral distress, injury, burnout, and trauma of this profession, I have an embodied understanding of how our work as nurses can impact our well-being, our spirit, and our capacity to continue in our careers. I also recognize that to many of us, nursing is a calling. So with that in mind, it's my intention today to create a space for you to show up to as the soft humans that you are, feel the love of this harm reduction community, and experience the invaluable medicine our guest is here to offer us today. So last but not least, I'll introduce our guest. So our guest today is Leslie Wilkin. She is a registered social worker and a registered clinical counselor based on Gabriola Island here in BC. Her career over the last 17 years has included work in perinatal addictions and violence against women in the downtown east side, acute social work at Vancouver General Hospital Concurrent Disorders Inpatient Unit, intensive case management and outpatient mental health and addictions treatment in Nanaimo. Currently, she runs a private psychotherapy practice with a focus on relational and developmental trauma that has a special interest in supporting other helping professionals heal and thrive. So Leslie is a dear friend of mine who has been a support and friend throughout my healing journey, and I'm just very grateful to be able to share her and her knowledge and her expertise here today. So that being said, I will pass it over to her, and the chat is open if anyone has Q&A throughout. We'll be doing a little breakout room, and we'll save some questions for afterwards if you want to have a more of a discussion around that. So feel free to use the chat and be as interactive as you'd like today. So take it away, Leslie.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just playing around with my view here to see what makes the most sense. There we go. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here during Nursing Week. It feels a little extra special since I'm not a nurse myself to be a guest here, invited in to support you all and the really important work that you do. So I want to move into what we'll cover in today, but I like to often start Um, any offering that I do, I like to start with a poem just as a way to shift us a little bit out of our cognitive brains, get into the imaginal, and to help with arriving a little bit. This is a beautiful poem by Mary Oliver. I imagine some of you know her work. And I was looking for a poem that made me think of nurses, and this was the one that came up. So yeah, feel free to get comfortable and just let your system take this in, and then we'll go from there. So the poem's called In the Storm. Some black ducks were shrugged up on the shore. It was snowing hard from the east, and the sea was in disorder. Then some sanderlings, 5 inches long, with beaks like wire, flew in, snowflakes on their backs, and settled in a row behind the ducks. Their backs were also covered with snow. So close they were all but touching. They were all but under the roof of the ducks' tails. So the wind pretty much blew them over. They stayed that way, motionless, for maybe an hour. Then the sanderlings, each a handful of feathers, shifted and were blown away, out over the water, which was still raging. But somehow they came back, and again the ducks, like a feathered hedge, let them stoop there and live. If someone you didn't know told you this, as I am telling you this, would you believe it? Belief isn't always easy, but this much I have learned, if not enough else, to live with my eyes open. I know what everyone wants is a miracle. This wasn't a miracle, unless, of course, kindness, as now and again some rare person has suggested, is a miracle, as surely it is. So just letting that land as you arrive here, just feeling what stirs in you. And there's an invitation as well just to find yourself, your body here in space. So that could mean orienting just to the space that you're in, or grounding and rooting down through your feet or through your sitting bones. As you make a little more contact with your environment, you might just notice the land underneath you, and just notice the relationship to that land underneath you. It could be new, or it could be an ancient relationship. It might feel nourishing. It might feel complicated. And so just noticing the way the earth is holding and supporting you, and maybe the ways you also give back that care and relationship. So a little bit of grounding just to shift us in. The theme for today will be working through our bodies, through the knowing of our right brain, through relationships. So just an opportunity to land here. And I won't introduce myself much more than Sarah already has. I feel like that bio pretty much covers it. But I would actually love just to get my bearings here. I would love if it's possible for you to just pop in the chat quickly, like where you're joining from, or what you know, what your working context is. That's really helpful to help me orient to the discussion today. I know it's mostly nurses, but I would love to, if it's no trouble, just to get a quick little snapshot of who I'm connecting with here. I'm not seeing anything pop up, so maybe folks are multitasking. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. PCH. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. There's Nanaimo. Amazing. Great. Welcome. Okay, you got a social worker, harm reduction coordinator, mental health. Beautiful. Nova Scotia. Oh, wonderful. Amazing. Beautiful. So it's really neat to hear people from all over and different scopes of practice. And so hopefully something in this talk today will resonate with each of you. So I was invited here. There's Nova Scotia. Oh, Nova Scotia again. Amazing. I used to live in Nova Scotia. Um, so I was invited here to hopefully by Sarah offer a presentation to support your learning as practitioners. As I understand, that's what these lunch and learns are about. Um, to work in the context that you work, often with folks who are suffering, often with folks who are in unbelievably complicated situations, but also to offer something that might support your own resilience as practitioners, and something that by extension will then go on to support the folks that you're working with. So my intentions for today, this is sort of how I imagine the flow of today going. I wasn't sure how big of a group we would be, so I thought I would keep it a little bit more presentation style. But really, I'm wanting to offer a space to connect you with your inner and outer resources. So what are the qualities, the practices, the places, the relationships that support and sustain you in this work? I want to very lightly introduce the idea of sort of right brain ways of knowing. We're talking about the right hemisphere of the brain, why that's important, what kind of wisdom is held there, and why that's necessary, especially when we're working in complex and really difficult situations. And I want to discuss the concept of the four bodies. And this is again to bring us into different ways of knowing, right? I think all of us, we go through our professional training and then into our professional context, and we get often very specialized in one way of knowing, which is necessary to become skillful at something. But there's these other ways of knowing that really actually are also needing to be nurtured in order for us to sustain ourselves as practitioners, and I think for us to be really wise and robust in the work we're doing, especially when we're coming into contact with um, things that are heartbreaking and things that are often unsolvable problems, that our expertise alone can't help us navigate through. Um, so I want to deepen into the concepts of regulation, resourcing, resilience, and reciprocity, and what those mean and how they work together for us to become really robust or skillful practitioners. And then I want to offer an opportunity for just a little bit of small group relating, because I think that's really nice to just have that bit of uh, contact, informal, private contact, just to chew on the material together, see how it's landing, just get a little bit of resonance with each other. And then finally, just a bit of space for questions and comments at the end. So that's my intention. That's my hope for the flow of the day today. If questions pop up as I'm chatting or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat or to use a little raised hand signal. I'll try to pause and tend to that. If questions pop up in the chat, I might not stop right away and respond to it, but I'll try to make space to speak to that. Otherwise, we'll have a little space at the end. So as a way to start off, and I want this, my hope was for this to be kind of reflective. It may or may not feel interactive, but I don't want this to feel overly academic and formal in terms of a learning experience. This is really meant to get out of that left brain dominant way that we often navigate the world and come to be experts in things and connect with different aspects of our knowingness. Um, so the first thing I'll invite you to do is just take a moment and pause. And you might think about, when do I feel most like myself? And there might be one or two or three experiences that come to mind. When do I feel most like myself? Yeah. Uh-huh. And so I'm hoping everyone has connected with, yeah, at least one. Yeah. And just by engagement, you could give me a little signal with an emoji that might be the easiest way to connect here. Is how many people, when you reflected on that question of when do I feel most like myself, how many people thought of something that involves movement? Give me a little. Yeah, there we go. I see some thumbs up and yeah. Awesome. Okay. And how many folks reflected on something that involves connection, either with other humans or animals or something in the spiritual realm? Yeah, yeah. Again, I'm seeing, there we go. Uh-huh. How many people thought of something that really centers around nature, being in relationship with the natural world and a sense of place in the natural world? Yeah, awesome. Great. And finally, how many folks thought of something that engages play or creativity? Has like a playfulness, or, as adults, we're like playfulness, but it's like, I don't know, something that's, you know, yeah, making art, music, riding a bicycle. Yeah, great. Okay. So movement, connection, land, sense of place, and creativity and play. And so I asked that question to start because I actually want to highlight that there is a healing intelligence inside us that actually knows what we need to be regulated. Right. The sense that this is when I feel most like myself is this healing intelligence that actually knows what we need, knows what regulates us, knows what brings us most in contact with our steady and resilient self. So I want to honor that deep sense of knowing that is already in the space here. And what I'm going to try to do is pile a little theory on top of that to help to really just deepen into that as a practice. Um, so I want to speak first to that idea of rhythm and movement. And when I ask, do some of you have something that comes in that involves movement? I want us to imagine that rhythm is our earliest form of regulation, right? That left, right, left, when we think about dancing, running, walking, moving, that there's something in rhythm that is our first and deepest form of regulation. And when we think about stress and trauma, we might think of that as a loss of rhythm in some ways. The rhythm starts to go too fast or too slow. It gets stuck, it gets chaotic. And might want to imagine that there's a bringing back of a rhythm. And this is really drawing on the work of Dr. Alan Shore, some of his work with interpersonal neurobiology, but I would also suggest that this probably mirrors deep indigenous ways of knowing, but that there is a rhythm that wants to be restored here. And I would second to that is connection is our other most intuitive form of regulation here. So when I said, how many of you involve some sense of connection, humans, animals, the spiritual realm, is center to our humanness, right? That we actually, most things, we aren't meant to go at alone, right? We are wired to be in relationality, and that forms a robustness in our system. So again, there's that inner healing intelligence of like, this is when I feel most like myself. When I asked about nature, sense of place, the natural world, I also want to suggest that a relationship with the land will bring you both into a feeling of connection, a sense of place and belonging. Because let's be real, we don't only have relationship with humans, um, but also a sense of rhythm, a sense of awe and enchantment. And a relationship with the land brings us into a sense of vastness, right? Like the unknowable truths of the world, right? There's a vastness that it's like, this is so big. And I'm going to bring this into our topic today because I'm going to imagine that you know the feeling of sitting with something that's like, this is so big, right? Like, here's me, and here's the bigness of what I'm having to hold and conceptualize. And we need to have capacity in our systems to know how to be with that bigness, right? Um, and to be with the complexity and the unknowability of that bigness, right? And when we talk about right brain and left brain, we'll come to learn that there is a part of us that's actually really well equipped to be with complexity and uncertainty, and a part of us that doesn't do well with that. That hates complexity and wants certainty. And I'm going to suggest that some of the environments that we tend to work and learn in might feed that side of our ways of knowing, sometimes at the expense of that complexity and uncertainty. So, um, I asked also finally, in terms of when do you feel most like yourself, I asked about play. And I want to suggest that this isn't even unique to humans, but across mammals. When we actually look at mammals, you're going to see that play is the primary learning mechanism. Play is the primary learning mechanism that stimulates new neurodevelopmental growth. Play is a way that we, through embodiment and relationality, get to learn new experiences. Play you can also think of as a state that puts a little stress in our system, but not too much. There's a little stress in our system, but there's a little connection there too. And that seems to be the perfect recipe. We need enough stress for it to stretch us and enough connection to feel safe. And that's when play really allows us to learn, right? So I'm going to suggest that we don't stop playing as adults, right? We find new ways to do that. So I want to introduce those concepts of the pillars of regulation, right? Rhythm, connection, the land, play as necessary components of building our resilience and capacity. Um, so, that said, I also want to recognize that when we have this innate healing intelligence that knows on some level, like, this is what I need to be well, um, it can be hard to access this all the time, right? When we come to a place of, I feel depleted, I feel burnt out, this is too much, I'm uninspired, I'm feeling disconnected. Is there all kinds of things that disconnect us from this deep sort of intrinsic knowing? Okay. Um, I'm curious to hear if any of you, I have my list, but I want to just hear from you. What makes it hard to connect with this inner healing intelligence in ourselves? What makes it hard to, even though it's like my body knows this, you just gave me some theory that confirms it. What makes it hard to connect with this? Put it in the chat uh-huh. Or you can unmute yourself. I don't think we're a huge group here. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, daily grind. You got it. You got it. Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Um, yeah. So I've got, yeah, it feels like admitting weakness. Yeah. Out giving nature, putting others first. You got it. You got it. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think you know what I'm about to tell you here in the sense of when we are in a state of stress or chronic dysregulation, it's hard to act in our own best interest, right? It almost that when we are in that disrupted rhythm, it's hard to know what we actually need to be well. We sometimes get in our own ways, not intentionally, of course. Um, I want to speak to what others said is I think we live in a culture that invites us and encourages us to override our bodies. When we override our bodies in all kinds of ways, we override our bodies through the pressures and demands that are piled on these like sensitive containers that are carrying us through life. Um, we override our bodies through a sense of, if there's a sense towards like caregiving or people pleasing, that sense of I have to take care of you at the expense of me might be a way that we override our bodies. When we have a sense of kind of performance-based self-worth, like I have to meet a certain expectation to feel safe and okay, we might override our bodies in that way. Um, so another way we can kind of override and disconnect from ourselves. I've also got we disconnect from this deep way of knowing through prioritizing the left brain ways of knowing, and we'll get into that again. But that sense of the part of us that wants certainty, that wants organization, that wants control, that wants answers and outcomes, actually isn't very good at bringing us into contact with these ways of knowing and being that regulate us. And as a culture, we reward that. So there's a bit of a paradox here. The person we have to be to fit in goes against that innate healing intelligence that actually is going to sustain us, right? I want to speak to someone who said like, oh, it can feel like weakness. I want to also suggest that we have an individualism in our culture that sort of denies our inherent need for each other. There's this fantasy that we can go it alone, and in fact, that we should be able to go it alone. Um, and that it erodes that idea of communities of care, and it really shifts us towards self-reliance, and it even makes the idea of like needing connection shameful. And so the way individualism can really work against this deep embodied healing intelligence. Um, Disconnection from the land, right? Through environmental destruction, through urbanization. I think for those of us who are living in a context of colonialism, right? There's like a lacking of a sense of place, an understanding of a sense of place and what that means, which I would suggest then extends into a disconnection from our bodies and our senses. Um, and then I would finally say that we have learned to trivialize play. We've learned to think of it as like an add-on for when there's time, and we've lost the centrality of play as our primary learning mechanism, right? We prioritize productivity and work, and we think of play as something extra and not something that we actually need to metabolize new and difficult experiences, a necessity to metabolize new and different experiences. So the invitation here, just to uh, make this land a little more, hopefully let it land a little more, is you might just pause and see, it's like, oh, do any of those resonate with me? I know what makes me feel most like myself. Can I just see what makes it hard to lean into that wisdom? What might be uh, the factors that might make it harder to connect with that in a reliable way? Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. So just a moment to pause and to digest, and you don't have to share these pieces, but just letting your kind of mind wander with the material and see what's forming here. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and when you feel ready to come back into connection, you might do that with just a little rhythm in your body. So that could be like just a little rhythm in your feet. Or just a little rhythm, yeah. Or just a little rhythm in your breath. And just find feeling the way that brings you a little bit more back into connection here. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain, a little bit more about that, just to support some of these concepts. This really is drawing from the work of Dr. Ian McGilchrist and again, Dr. Alan Shore. Um, and this is going to be, as I was saying to Sarah, I was like, this is going to be like a water ski version of some concepts because we're obviously working with a small amount of time. But um, we, of course, we know our brain has two hemispheres. I'm talking to nurses, you know the details of this more than I do in some ways. And I think there was this old school idea that like the left does this and the right does this, the left does language and the right does creativity. And it's a lot more integrated than that. It's like the left does language most of the time, except when it's our own name or a swear word or song lyrics, then that's the right brain, right? Or like the the right can do creativity and the left can do very abstract problem solving, which requires a certain amount of creativity, right? And so it's a little bit more integrated. But what I would say is so our brain's helping us navigate all these aspects of language and emotion and relationship and learning. But our right brain comes online first. And this is important to know. Our right brain comes online first because our limbic system is deep in the right brain. And so we're starting to experience the world via the right brain, via being perhaps rocked, feeling vibration through touch, right? Through sound. We're experiencing the right brain uh, and its wiring long before the left brain really starts to pick up traction, and what it's good at, which is, um, the linguistic and the complex and so these right brain ways of knowing we might think of as our first pathway to relationality and to the land. And then the left brain kind of comes online. And I like that idea because it reminds me that the right brain is actually meant to be the leader and the left brain is meant to support in some way, right? Because the right brain can do some really cool things that I don't know that we fully appreciate, right? It can be very expansive. It can have awareness in two places. It can have it kind of takes a wide angle. It doesn't hone in on the details, but it takes a wide angle view. It can hold paradox, it can hold complexity. Um, and the left brain might be more, we would think about it as the rabbit hole brain, right? It's detail oriented, it wants certainty, it wants answers. It can kind of chase its tail and it wants more and more and more of that. And so we can imagine that the way most of us were taught to learn academically and vocationally, but I would suggest even the way most of us were taught to engage with our own feelings is a little bit more of that chasing our tail of the left brain. I feel some way. Why do I feel that way? I have to figure it out. And when I figure it out, what do I do about it? And what's going to fix it? And we want to imagine that as the left brain. And if we think about the right brain is meant to lead and the left brain is meant to follow, then what we've done is we've let the part of our brain that is less equipped to deal with the robustness and the complexity and the difficulty and paradox of life take the lead. When we don't have enough support through our bodies, through connection, through rhythm, through the land, we're going to rely overly on that side of our brain, which is not well equipped to navigate these complex situations. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my one slide here because this is a hard one to explain without an image. And this is an expansion on a concept by Dr. Marion Woodman. And very quickly, I'm going to do a little. Oh, sharing is not turned on. Sarah. Okay, all good? There we go. Thanks. Okay, yeah. Okay, can folks see that? Yeah, all right. So I'm going to invite us to imagine that these are our ways of knowing here. We've got the animal body, which is our instinctual way of knowing, our intuition, rhythm. We talked about that. We've got the spiritual body, which is the sacred, the ritual, but also those unsolvable problems, right? The paradoxes, the uncertainties, the unknowables in life. We've got the intellectual body, which really, and this is when we're talking about the left brain, that is focused on mastery, that's focused on problem solving, that's focused on getting it right, that is a great organizer. And then we've got the attachment and the emotion body, which is really oriented towards relationship, belonging, connection, but also very sensitive to separation and intrusion, right? And so you might imagine that three of these quadrants are really the domain of that right brain. They're really they're felt senses, they are nonverbal, they are non-intellectual, they are holding the expansiveness of um, what we're trying to contend with. So again, when we don't have enough support either growing up or in our current environments, we might tend to rely overly on that problem solving, getting it right, linear part of ourselves and become more disconnected from those more again, intuitive ways of knowing that you all sort of flagged in yourselves in the beginning of the session. We have to remember there's some catches to being in that overly left brain place. And primarily is left to its own devices, it can be a place that leads us into perfection. It can be a place that leads us into an inflexibility. And it can lead us into a place of anxiety, right? And so when I'm talking with clients or I'm talking with folks that I'm supporting, I'm going to come back to the group here. When I'm talking with folks I'm supporting, I'll often say, when I found that we've gotten tangled in that place, I'll say something like, we're a little tangled in the weeds here, aren't we? Or it feels a little bit like we're in a hedge maze that we can't find our way out of. Do people know that feeling, either in themselves or sitting with clients when it's like, what should I do? And I've made my pros and cons list and I've thought about it in every way that I can, and I just need to figure out the right answer. And it's there's a distress that starts to spin in the nervous system when we found ourselves sort of tangled in that place. So when Sarah asked me to come in today, I was like, well, this feels like what I really want to talk about, because I want to talk about how do we shift from that narrow way of knowing that I think we're often sort of forced into via the culture, via our academic training, via the expectations and demands, and come back to these ways of knowing that are going to support a little more robustness and resilience in our systems. So I want to pause, just because that's a lot of information I just kind of blasted at you, and just see if there's any questions or reflections, anything that's coming up that you'd like me to kind of untangle or speak to a little more. And then I'll keep going. Okay. Okay. Right. So here I'll put it back to you then, is take a moment and think about the context that you work in. Okay. Really varied contexts and environments from what I got in the group here. And just take a moment to consider, what are the things that I am being asked to witness or hold in my work that my left brain, my intellectual brain, is not equipped for. You don't have to say it out loud, you don't have to put it in the chat, but just take a moment. It's like, what am I being asked to hold in my day or my week that way of knowing, that we are uh, conditioned into might not be equipped to hold. Mm-hmm. Okay. So some of the things that I wrote down were, we're asked to hold grief. We're asked to hold immense amounts of grief. I imagine that's true for all of you in one way or another. Um, and I want to think of grief as something that's actually too big for our bodies. I want you to think of grief as something that comes into the system that is too big for the system, right? And so we can't hold grief. We can't think our way out of grief. We can't problem solve our way out of grief. We can't even self-regulate our way through grief. We actually need to lean into those capacities around what is going to build a big enough container to hold the immensity of this. Right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Bye, Jody. Okay. Um, the other thing, of course, we're bearing witness to trauma, other experiences that overwhelm the system. I think the truth is, in our work, sometimes we see evil and cruelty. I think it's a hard way to say that, but we see things that are really hard. I would say the systemic equivalent of cruelty is injustice, right? Um, we see dilemmas inside people around, who am I? Who can I be? How do I be who I am, and stay connected to the people and the things I need? And we see the things we can't control. We see how many aspects of life we can't control, right? And we can really get pulled into that maze of trying to figure it all out. And so the invitation here is to come into, what are those right brain ways of knowing to help us hold the things our left brain isn't actually equipped to hold, these problems that can't be easily solved, these things that we can't control. And I would suggest that when we are trying to rely overly on that, again, that intellectual way of knowing, this erodes our resilience over time. I think that it's like using the wrong tool for the job. It kind of wears it down, and we have to put more and more and more effort in, and it's just not quite shifting. And so really, what we're leaning back into is, how can I come back into that wisdom and capacity of that right brain way of knowing, of rhythm, of connection, of land, of playfulness, that is actually going to shift my system into a place where I can hold the robustness and the complexity of what I'm witnessing. Okay. So to make this a little bit more practical, okay, I'm gonna imagine if you find yourself in that place, if you find yourself tangled in the weeds, you find yourself in that maze that you can't find your way out of, is I'm going to invite you to start not from the top down, from your brain trying to figure it out, but from the bottom up. And what that might mean is grounding your body, finding rhythm, yeah, finding simple points of connection. Who can hold me right now? Who do I feel, even if they're not physically in proximity, who do I feel a connectedness and a relatedness to right now? Um, what's big and steady enough in my life to hold this? Is it my community? Is it the land? Is it the tree in my backyard? Is it the ocean? Is it what's actually gonna, what's steady enough to help my system hold this and the complexity of this? Um, and what can I trust or count on in myself? You know, can I survive this? What can I trust? Do I trust my capacity to survive this? Do I trust my capacity to find some steadiness in myself again? Right. And then how can play help me digest this? Okay. Yeah. So some things to lean into, to work with. Okay. I want to finally talk about, I'm tracking our time here. I want to finally talk about reciprocity, and then I want to give an opportunity just to um, let you digest this all. I was saying to Sarah, I have a tendency to like cram a lot into a small space. So um, again, we're talking about these principles of these right brain principles, reciprocity, regulation, resourcing, and resilience. Okay, bye, Sonia. Thank you. Um, so reciprocity, we might consider that, you know, this is built into a larger worldview around trust and responsibility. But today I want to talk about it in the context of relationship. And I want to suggest that as helping professionals, many of us might have this sort of imbalanced way of relating, right? We might be really prone to giving. That might come very naturally to us. And that could be from early life. That could be from some early life material around like you know, I have to take care of you so I'm okay. I have to take care of you to feel regulated. But I also want to suggest that caregiving is deeply instinctual and intuitive for a lot of us. It is a deep neural circuit in us as mammals to like, when we see someone who's hurting, we want to give care. When we see someone who's vulnerable, we want to give care. So I don't want to pathologize that. I want to really normalize it as part of our humanness. It can be deeply pleasurable and meaningful to take care of others. However, there is a cost to being in that side of ourselves for for too much of the time. Really, it is a way of relating that centers the need of the other and sort of disavows the need of the caregiver, which in the moment of urgency makes sense, but in a prolonged way, we might find that we're in this imbalanced kind of relating when we find ourselves having a hard time knowing what our own needs are, or knowing what our own feelings are, or being like, I don't know what I want. I need something, but I don't know what I need. I don't know what I'm feeling right now, right? There can be a bit of a disconnection from self. Um, there can be a disconnection from our bodies and the signals that's sending because we've become very other oriented. Um, Personal relationships can feel a little unsatisfying. It's like, oh, I give and give and give, and no one notices that I'm not okay, or I just feel a little bit depleted, or I feel, you know, I feel a little resentful. And we can end up overriding our boundaries. There can be this sense of it's getting harder and harder to say no, right? So I want to bring that in as another element of how we take care of ourselves. Um, that adult relationships are really meant to be reciprocal in order to be satisfying. And so when we're doing work that requires us giving care, being in that caregiving circuit of our brain much of the day, we really need to be creating a life that brings that adult reciprocity in, that brings that regulation, that mature mirroring and back and forth in. And I think caregivers have to work extra hard for this. We have to make it really conscious that we're doing this. And so, some questions I might put to you would be, do I have enough relationships in my life that have capacity to hold me? not the ones that I hold, but do I have enough relationships that have the capacity to hold me? I would also say, do I trust others to hold me? Do I feel shame around needing care or receiving care? Uh, are there non-human relationships that hold me? And finally, are the parts of me that are needy or scared or vulnerable or tired, because we all have them, right? Do they have anywhere to go, right? What do I do with those parts of me when they show up, right? And if the answer to any of those questions is hard, then I'm going to invite you, in addition to those pieces that we touched on, rhythm, connection, play, land, is there may be a need to tend to reciprocity here. Um, so I'm going to bring this to the idea of communities of care. This time went really fast, but the idea of communities of care, that the individual self and the system are not equipped to deal with the magnitude and intensity of what you're seeing in your work. That's just a hard truth, right? When we lack reciprocity and we lack true regulation, then we're less likely to be able to pull on the wisdom of the right brain. That is our instinctual way of moving through hard things. Part of our brain was built to deal with the difficulty of life. Part of our brain was not, right? And when we don't have that rhythm and that reciprocity and that resourcing, we might end up relying on the part of ourself that was meant to refine the details, not meant to carry us through the magnitude of enormous and difficult problems and suffering. Um, so I would say that building communities of care with peers that have similar worldviews, similar capacity, this is really key, might be the most important thing we can do to sustain this resilience. When we feel that holding around us and being held in reciprocity, we come into contact with that healing intelligence. When we come into contact with that healing intelligence, we do those things that help us feel like ourselves, that help us regulate. And then we have more space to come back into relationship in a good way. We might imagine it, rather than a coil that gets tighter and tighter, like in the left brain, we might imagine it like a spiral that gets more and more expansive as we tend to it. Um, yeah. And so we are really, what we're trying to do in communities is not how do I fix this, but how do I build a container for my own body, for my community, to hold, that is big and sturdy enough to hold the work that we're doing here. So I'll pause with that. That's my piece. What I'd love to do is give like 6 minutes or so, Sarah, to just let folks come into small groups. Maybe, like, we're pretty small here, so maybe 4 and 4, or 3 and 3, and just chew. Oh, someone has to go. Okay, okay, yeah, no problem. Okay, I'm wondering, maybe we'll skip small groups. I'm feeling like we're a pretty small little group, but how about this? How about we use, rather than coming into small groups, we just come into connection here a little bit, and I would just love to hear, how is this landing for you? What's stirring? What's landing in a smooth way? What's landing in a crunchy way? Right? I don't expect you to retain all of this. Is there anything that's sticking out, or that you want me to untangle? And I would love to just use our last few minutes here together to have a little connection and dialogue, and to hear from you. So, yeah, feel free to unmute or put yourself in the chat. Mhm.
I'll start.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Sarah. It's nice to see you again. Thank you, Leslie. I am actually noticing like just some grief. Just it feels like it's been a long stretch of time since yeah, I'm not sure I'm using it the right way, but like some of that reciprocity where I've been in relationship with the resourcing that matters to me, lots of it connecting to nature, but yeah, just realizing the pace of life how quickly I set that stuff to the side. And your energy, your presentation, like I feel my body settle, and with that, this rise in fatigue, and yeah, and then just this longing, this awareness of longing and ache for those uh, the people, the places, the experiences that just feel like being in partnership with life. So, but great, like with that, really, this undercurrent and undertone of gratitude, just really appreciating you bringing that all back into my awareness, so I can make choices. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. I can really appreciate the grief in that, the grief and the longing. Yeah, it's pointing towards like, oh, there's a yearning in my body for more of something here. Yeah, I get that. I get that. Yeah, important signal coming through. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, saw a few things in the chat here. Grounding and validating, acknowledging emotions. Yeah, you not be able to process everything at once. So yeah, I'm tired, I rest. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to hear it's landing in that way for folks. That idea too of, do I give myself enough space to notice what's happening in me? Or am I overriding myself so much I can't even pause and really lean into that? Yeah. Or yeah, that sense of, one of my teachers says body time is slow time, right? When we're in that, all the forces of our culture that praise the left brain, it's like go, 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 go. And it's like our body actually needs that slower earth rhythm to be like, what am I feeling? What am I needing? Am I tired? Oh my gosh, yes, I am, right? Like to be able to feel that rhythm that is actually going to sustain us and hold us. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's stirring some things for folks and some things to pay attention to. Yeah, good. Yeah, uh-huh. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Yoga, I agree. And the service, yeah, Robin Wilkin, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, beautiful writing around reciprocity, heard in a concept with nature, but also as a broader concept, that idea of, can we move from scarcity and competition to trust and responsibility, right? And does that actually give more space in our systems to be in connection with each other? So yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, thank you for the engagement. I know we were a small group. Thank you for your presence and your listening and care. I'll hang around for a couple more minutes if anyone has questions or comments. Yeah, beautiful. Recognize how lucky I am to have people. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Right? That idea, we really need each other. There's nothing wrong with needing each other. It's actually like in our neurobiology, that is true regulation, is connection. It's not just the things we do to manage alone. So yeah, thank you so much, Carrie and Kendra. Yeah, beautiful. So some things to carry with you, hopefully, that stir your attention in from that narrow lens, so that hopefully we widen the lens a little bit. You're looking for different things maybe than you were an hour ago. So wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you, Leslie. I appreciate you so much. That was beautiful, and I'm very much in my feelings right now. But I think this is truly the medicine that nurses need right now, especially in the worlds that we work in. So I appreciate you taking the time to teach us, and this will be shared with our entire membership. So hopefully, folks will take the time to watch on their own time as well. So thank you. I'll stop the recording.